All right, everybody, welcome back here to coverage of the U.S. Regional Championship here in Dallas, Texas. My name is Corey Baumeister, and today I am joined by our 2016 World Champion. It's Brian Braun-Duin. BBD, how are you, and what are you looking forward to as we round out coverage here of the RC?
I'm doing great, Corey. Thank you for asking, and I'm looking forward to seeing standard format Magic the Gathering. I don't know if you're familiar with such a thing.
I've played once or twice.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been an awesome tournament so far. Really diverse field of decks, players, and then also just how great a lot of these decks are to watch. So I am pretty excited. It's a really skill dependent format. There's a lot of play to all the decks, even the ones that are more straightforward looking.
Yeah, there's some heavy play to all these decks, that's for
That's
sure.
right.
Basically, every single match that I've been watching on the broadcast so far, I'm thinking, okay, maybe this deck absolutely destroys this deck, and it's like, it's just not the case for any matchup. Every matchup is a grind. Every matchup, there's a lot of decisions going into it. So needless to say, as we get towards the end of this broadcast, we're starting to just see some phenomenal Magic players that really know their deck upside and down. So as we get ready for some of these really pivotal matches, we're going to take a look at standings and see where we're at in the tournament so far. And BBD, with one round left to go, how is it looking for these players? Who do you think is still live to be able to make the elimination matches?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say because there's so many draws, right? You have 12 through 16 are all draws. Second and third place have draws as well, which makes it interesting because 11-2-1, there will probably be some players at that record who make it into the top 8. But there'll probably also be some players who missed at that record as well. So it's going to be, I would say that anyone on this sheet here is probably live. Anyone who has 2 wins and a loss has probably some chance of making it in, but it's hard to say for sure. I think London Glenn is probably the only player that looks to be in a pretty likely shot of guaranteed top 8. I won't say it's even 100% there because you never know what could happen, but.
Wow, way to take the easy way out there, BBD. No definitive answer whatsoever there. I like it. But honestly, you're so right. The tiebreakers really come into play. These really large events, anything can happen in the last round. It really is dictated by the fact of, okay, did table 3 draw? Okay, maybe that I can draw. It ends up being quite messy when it comes to that final round. So now that we take a look at standings, let's just get into it, which is almost assuredly winning in Magic. We're going to be taking a look at Adam Weiss versus Slater Claudel. And let's take a look at Adam Weiss's deck first. This isn't exactly the deck that I would say is the most played deck, maybe even the top 4 or 5 archetypes. Walk us through Gruul Aggro here, BBD.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically a mono red aggro deck that's been relatively popular in this format. Maybe not one of the best decks, but certainly a well-played deck. But the Gruul version of this deck has a lot of extra power to it. Notably, Questing Druid or Seek the Beast provides a lot of ability to kind of grind a little bit later in the game. And as we've talked about, being able to grind is pretty important in this format. One thing that's really interesting about this build is that it's based around double striking. The two-headed Hunter's Adventure Side gives double strike. Twinferno does as well. So there's a kind of a more combo-y element to this red deck where you can use a Slick Shot Show Off or one of the prowess creatures like Codebreaker or Swift Spear and pump it up pretty big and then double strike it, kind of almost like a Temur Battle Rage scenario used to be a big deck back in the day. So I like that element of this deck. I feel like that gives it some one-shot potential out of nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did just see Adam win off a mold to 5 here in that last game up against 4-Color Legends. So deck looks really powerful. Adam won that match to pretty much lock up that Pro Tour invite, but now it is a win and in for the top 8. Let's take a look at Adam's opponent here. We got Slater Claudiel playing Golgari mid-range, maybe with a small splash for white. Tell us a little bit about this deck and how it's going to line up against Gruul Aggro.
Yeah, I mean, the Golgari midrange deck is just another one of the varied midrange decks in this format. And I think in general, it lines up pretty well against Gruul Aggro. Glissa Sunslayer is very difficult to attack into, even with prowess triggers, and doesn't die to play with fire. And then A lot of these other cards have the ability to gain some life back, such as Shieldred, Graveyard Trespasser, Tranquil Throwback, and so forth. So I think there is a lot of ability for this kind of a deck to go toe to toe with the mono red deck. And I'm going to be, or the green red deck. I'm going to be really interested to see if some of that double striking technology ends up putting it over the edge, because a lot of the power of this Golgari mid-range deck in those kinds of matchups is the ability to block so well. Like if you're blocking with a Shieldred, you know you're going to get, even if your opponent dumps a ton into a creature to make it big enough, you know you're at least going to get a trade out of it. But that's not necessarily the case against Adam's deck. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, it makes sense. In Adam's deck, most mono red decks play some lightning strikes. So, I mean, Glissa is looking like it's going to be really, really powerful. So, all right, let's jump into this. This is definitely some winning in Magic here between Adam and Slater. A ton on the line, and these players are ready to go. So, let's get into it. It looks like Adam is on a mulligan to 6. Looks to be a keep from Slater. Well, who do you like in the matchup, though, if you're going into it with Adam on the play? Would you say slight advantage on the play, or do you still just give Golgari the edge here?
I think it's close. I think with the Gruul on the play, if you knew for sure Gruul's on the play, maybe you give them a slight edge. But I think it'd be pretty close even in that kind of a scenario.
All right, so here's a duress. You see 2 lands. You see a couple pump spells. But overall, this doesn't seem like the ideal draw from Adam. No slick shot show off. I'm going to try to not mess up that card name throughout the day, but that's going to be a tough one. As well as any ability to draw extra cards with Seek the Beast. So just an okay hand here, BBD.
Yeah, I think Slater's going to be really happy to see that hand. There's no second creature to go off of. The second chapter on Kumano. And then, yeah, there's not a lot of threat of damage either.
It was a big draw step there to try to find any creature to get the value off Kumano faces Kakazan, and doesn't find it. Just picks up a play with fire, and back to Slater. Slater goes with the best basic swamps. Gotta love those lands. And goes to just play the Dread Knight instead of adventuring it. I feel like you just can never adventure that card in this matchup.
Right. It's such a huge time investment, and it's like losing you life. I think there are scenarios sometimes in these matchups where games get grindy and you do have that kind of a luxury, but that mostly happens after sideboard. That's rarely a game 1 scenario.
Totally agree. So there's the Monstrous Rage to get the roll on there and force through a good chunk of damage, but just another Monstrous Rage in hand there. So if Slater's able to clean up this 1/3/3 creature, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot in the way. Now, I do see from Slater there's a cut down as the for sure piece of removal, but just jams Glissa, the card that we were kind of talking about. And normally with lightning strikes in the deck, you have an easy way of dealing with that. So far, this just looks like the road is closed.
Yeah, this is brutal here because the Glissa also destroys the Kumano as well. If it deals combat damage, and because of the first strike and death touch, it would destroy it in combat as well. So there's really no way out of here for Adam when it comes to this Glissa. It's going to destroy that creature one way or another. You might as well block and soak up the damage at least.
See, I was thinking, yeah, you can just get rid of the roll too if it connects. Destroying the creature ends up being a heck of a lot better.
Yeah.
And we see the follow-up of Hostile Investigator, a new card here that's been making a lot of waves. Just a really nice body for 4 mana.
Yeah, it's just a really powerful card. It's nothing like, like, oh, this is going to win you the game, but it just provides a really nice like dual-edged threat of stripping a card out of their hand, giving you a little bit more cards, and the ability for it to trigger anytime cards get discarded. It actually comes up quite a lot in this format.
Yeah, and there's the follow-up here. 2 Caustic Broncos, the Snores, the Bronc Confidant, whatever nicknames you want to give that card. Really powerful in general, maybe not ideal for this matchup as you don't want to lose too much life, but yeah, this battlefield is just insurmountable here from Adam. And Slater's going to pick up game number 1 here in this final round. And both players look pretty cool, calm, and collected going into this. But BBD, they got to be feeling the pressure with a winning in at such high stakes like this.
Yeah, it's hard not to feel that kind of pressure. However, these players have also played 13 rounds of this tournament already,
Yeah.
and they're really familiar with their decks and the matchups. So, at the end of the day, you're just playing Magic. You're playing the same kind of Magic that you've been playing for 13 rounds, and presumably a lot more with these players practicing.
Yeah,
coming into these events. So.
Absolutely. So here is Slater's list, the Golgari mid-range. What do you like in the sideboard up against this hyper-aggressive mono-red deck? Gruul deck, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I'd be interested in. Number one, cut down. You want more cheap removal for sure. I think the duress as well is generally a card that's very good against these red decks, but might be less good against Adam's deck because a lot of his spells are actually creatures. So that is an interesting dynamic where you might not want duress as much. Terror Sunder is a card that I like against the sideboard cards that often come in, such as Urbrask's Forge. So I think, and at worst, you can pay 4 mana to destroy a creature. So these are some of the cards I'm looking at. Tranquil Frillback can gain you some life and also blow up an artifact or enchantment. And then lastly, old big Aklazats himself.
Yeah, the Bat God.
Yeah, I think it's just a really great game plan to have that as your top end and be like, I'm playing towards this Aklazat sometimes if you've drawn it. You're like, I can spew my cards a little bit more aggressively, just stay alive, put this thing down, and it'll probably be good enough to take over the game.
All right, let's take a look at Adam's list and see what we want to bring in from Adam's side. What do you like up against Golgari?
Well, number one, I like Strangle because as we just saw,
just for Glissa, right?
Yeah, you want to be able to kill Glissa, and there's some other cards that it kills as well. It does at the cost of discarding a card, but it can kill the Graveyard Trespasser as well. So I think that's a nice removal spell upgrade is the Strangles. But then past that, I think you want maybe a little bit more of the grindier element of the Urbrask's Forge, which can kind of help in some of these mid-range matchups provide a way to generate a consistent source of damage, a consistent source of threats, because it is easy to have happen what we saw in that game where a couple removal spells or something, a couple discard spells, removal spells, and like even if you draw something off the top, you're not at a point where it's going to be that impactful. And I think Urbrask's Forge can help with that a lot.
Yeah, really tough card for a lot of decks to deal with. So let's jump on into game number 2 between these two players and see what we got. So Adam on the play here. Looks like a mull to 6 once again from Adam. Though I do think this Gruul deck mulligans relatively well. I mean, we saw Adam on the play in this last round, mull to 5 and kind of win pretty easily up against 4-color legends.
I agree with that. With that being said, mid-range decks are usually bad decks to mulligan against because they will have so much interaction. But being on the play is worth so much that I think sometimes one of the issues with Golgari and sometimes some of these other mid-range decks as well is that they're just a little slow on the draw against these red decks. So that can easily happen.
Yeah, definitely want cut down for sure when you're on the draw. That's probably the best card you can have. So Adam goes Monastery, Swift Spear into the Codebreaker, and Go for the Throat is the answer for Slater. Now there is some Snakeskin Veils that you have available from Adam's side, but Slater was just like, if you got it, you got it. Wanted to get max value out of that. Do you like that kind of player? Do you like being very kind of defensive and I wouldn't say playing scared to it, but playing really as defensive as you possibly can be?
I think it really depends on the nature of the hand, because if that's your only removal spell and it must hit something, you'll probably want to do it while Adam's tapped out. But say like Slater had something like a Path of Peril in his hand, he might actually want Adam to cast a Snakeskin Veil and then follow it up with a sweeper. So it really depends on the nature of the hand. And those little micro decisions like that are sometimes what makes or breaks these matchups. And part of the reason why I think that this is a really good standard format is there's so many of those choices.
Agreed. Yeah, standard is definitely one of those formats that every little decision matters. You know, if you're playing modern, something like that, these really big game actions that you're taking, sometimes it doesn't matter as much the some of the minor decisions, but standard that is not the case. Every little edge matters.
And it looks like a snakeskin veil was picked up off of the Seek the Beast as well.
That's not really where you want it though, right? Like it's just so face up and
It
it's
is, yeah.
kind of brutal, but
It is really nice though that because Adam had plotted the demonic ruckus, so with the snakeskin veil, you feel much safer about it.
yep, plots that, gets a counter on the questing druid, and then just sends the swift spear here. And looks like before damage goes with play with fire to get another prowess creature. And yeah, that should be what, 4 damage off the swift spear plus play with fire for 6 total.
Yeah, and yeah, I believe. Well, so there's the demonic ruckus +1/+1. Let's see, there's 2 spells cast. I think it should be 5 total damage.
Oh, okay, okay.
No, so you're right, 6 total damage.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
yeah, you just can't oh, you're good. You just can't snakeskin veil or anything here, right? Like it's just way too bad if Slater's like, okay, I'll respond with another go for the throat.
I think you actually can
Yeah.
because you had face upped that the snakeskin veil existed with a Seek the Beast on end step while tapped
Yeah.
out, and Slater did not opt to play a removal spell at that moment in time. Okay, it does have it. Interesting.
Wow. So
Wow,
I mean,
yeah.
Adam played that as well as possible,
Yeah.
as he got the value off of it and got the max amount of damage possible while leaving behind a 4/4 questing druid. And looking at Slater's hand now, it looks like kind of chock full of creatures, but I don't think I saw a lot of removal spells there. There's Glissa, there's a couple Dread Knights, and a land in the back, a couple lands in the back. So what do you like? Do you just double creature here or just play Glissa and hope?
Yeah. I think in game 1, I would 100% play the Glissa, but after sideboard here, I kind of like playing the double creature. It's a lot
Yeah.
more mana efficient for one, and there's so much more interaction that can kill a Glissa after sideboard. And if that occurs, then you're in a lot of trouble.
Speaking of being in a lot of trouble, we just saw a case of the Crimson Pulse picked up for Adam. Now, this is a card that if you get that going, it is absolutely undeniable the power that it gets. You're just drawing so many cards at the beginning of your upkeep, discarding your hand and drawing 2. Most of the time you're spending your whole hand discard or playing out your whole hand anyways. So it really just reads, now you draw 3 cards instead of just drawing 1.
Yeah, an incredibly powerful card if it gets to that point. And another reason why I really like Terra Sunder type cards in these kinds of matchups is because of cards like that.
Yeah.
It is a really a swingy card for one, because Slater does have a lot of effective ways of handling cards like that between Glissa and some other cards. So it's if you get that going, it's very powerful, but it can also kind of be a card where you invested a lot into something that you thought was hoping would take over the game and it doesn't actually do so.
Yep, totally true. And it's going to be a lot better when you're on the play. Thinking about it when you're on the draw and you're going to just have more cards, it's kind of a 3 mana, I wouldn't say blank cardboard, but it's relatively blank until you empty your hand. Plus, there is Glissa to attack it and destroy an enchantment. But Glissa does come into play, and as it stands right now, BBD, there's no way to remove this Glissa. So we're going to discard a card, and we're going to draw a couple. Is there... Yeah, discard a card, then draw 2 is the ability when it comes into play. Is there Strangle? Oh.
Doesn't look like it. There is a show off though. And actually it's a situation here where even though Glissa is capable of taking out these artifacts and enchantments,
Yeah.
you also need it on defense because there's these giant creatures that are threatening. You're at 7 life, they're threatening lethal damage. So it is a very narrow line to walk here.
So BBD, do you attack like with Questing Druid and the 2/1 here to get in 2 damage? Like you don't, right? That's too loose at this point. Just to show off.
Yeah, it's way too loose. I mean, you're gonna attack with the token because it has to, but
yeah.
Yeah, that's way too risky here. And I think even if Slater sends Glissa sideways, I think
Mhm.
that's a really interesting decision. You could have left back the Slick Shot to block Glissa and protect it.
Yeah.
That would have been an interesting choice. I don't actually like.
Oh, BBD, I'm going to interrupt you here. This looks interesting. So I think what we're going to see here from Slater is, this is probably going to go through, and Adam's going to be like, well, at least I get to attack with a giant questing druid next turn. But Slater has a backup Glissa. So you can kind of do the not so attractive play of attack, destroy the case, but then just replay another Glissa as a blocker here. And if Adam doesn't find a strangle or something for it, we could just be seeing Slater claw back into this.
Yeah, 3 mana give Glissa Vigilance.
Yeah.
Sometimes with powerful line. Could also be. I think there was a hostile investigator. We could see that be played as well.
Okay.
I think that makes some sense as well. You have 2 blockers. You're gonna take some amount of damage, but I guess it is this vigilance line.
Because it is just a 4-mana 3/4 when no cards are in hand, right? I mean, you're not doing really anything
Right.
else there. Now
You're
let's
not.
see. There's probably a lot of cards that just win Adam the game here. Kamano Face's Kakazan is close.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, because now you get 4 damage through essentially with Slater being
I
at
think
6.
that might be lethal if Adam decides to send everything, because oh no, it won't be, but if
No, it's just 3 damage coming through, putting Slater to 2, right?
I think he's going to attack with everything here, because Glissa actually can't block the giant questing druid, or the token will
Yeah, of
trample over for
course.
lethal.
Well, it would only be what, it's 3 power, so 6. Yeah, well, it is only 1, right? 3
It would trample
power.
over for 2 or for 1.
Yeah, so
Oh,
Slater goes to
okay.
1 here.
Right. So it is 1 short. It looks like maybe 1 short of lethal then.
You can't be feeling good when your opponent goes down to 1 and you have a 1 power flyer against, a deck that has no way to generate a flyer.
Right.
Plus, you have this forge that's going to be picking it off one at a time. There is another land off the top, and we can get busy with the land.
Right. And this notably actually is kind of a nice one, where if you send it in the cottage, you get a food, you crack the food to go to 4. You have to. Yeah, that seems like a really nice play, actually. And I think you could possibly attack with both here, because you're facing, you'd be facing down.
Just blow up the forge, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would have liked that anyways, because you already have to block it. Like if there's another hasty threat, you're dead anyways. I would have liked that attack from Slater as well. So, all right, big draw step from Adam.
The Glissa only blows up enchantments. Correction on that.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
So you have to leave it back, but you could remove all 3 counters from it.
Yeah.
That is one possible line.
All right, that's spicy.
So that maybe was worth doing. Then you would take, I think, 2 damage.
All right, let's see. So, I mean, how really sustainable is this plan from Slater? Like, it doesn't work forever, right? Now, Kamano Faces Kakazan is going to flip. So now Adam is getting in 3 damage per attack and gaining 3. So it is damage neutral. Of course, if Adam draws anything, the game just ends.
You're right. If Slater doesn't have removal, any spell that pumps this show off basically ends the game.
Yeah. So any non-creature, half of the creatures are haste threats as well. So basically anything but land that isn't a Soakin' Sin is going to win the game here. So a lot of draws for Adam.
Yep. But the longer this goes on without anything, the more this kind of starts to slip away. But it looks like that was a questing druid drawn, which is a great draw.
Yep. So you just seek the beast right now. Not only is that one spell to get enough damage over the edge, but also you're drawing 2 cards. See Slater kind of head shrug here. I think we're probably heading to a game number 3 between these 2 players.
I think that forge will be enough.
I mean, yeah, it was already enough. No, maybe not. But yeah, the Forge boosts up the show off. So now what if there's a removal spell for the show off?
So if there's a removal spell for the show off, then, what are you committing there? You're not committing that much. You're just sending in, you're losing your 2/2, but that creature wasn't doing too much. Yeah.
All right, BBD, there we go. We're going to game number 3 between these two players. Winner is into the top 8. Loser, probably not in, but you have a chance that tiebreakers could swing your way. But the one bright thing, BBD, for both of these players is we will be seeing them later on at the Pro Tour here in Amsterdam a little bit later. So big congrats to them. And any decisions that you would change, play, draw from Adam's deck? I feel like Adam's deck's the only one where you would consider play, draw differences. I think Golgari, you're bringing in just your ways to kill creatures anyways, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think generally speaking, that's just what's going to happen. On Adam's side, I could see not wanting the case on the draw. Like we saw in that game, it didn't do that much because it's so easy for Slater to remove it. I think that might be a card that you like on the play when you're putting the pressure on Slater so effectively that it makes it hard, for them to answer it while they're also having to play this defensive game. And on the draw, it's much easier to answer.
Okay, Slater did mulligan down to 6, it looks like, this time with Adam keeping the opener, and Adam has the best start. Kamano faces Coxazon into what looks to be just like a very powerful hand. I saw Slick Shot show off. There's 2 more Kamanos, Monastery Swiftspear, and a Codebreaker, it looks like. Wow, BBD.
Yeah, that is an amazing
hand.
You get to get the value out of the second chapter and still play another one, and you're going to get the value out of the second chapter on the next one, and your Swiftspear is big enough to attack through the Moss Bridge. So yeah, that's a huge play there.
I mean, whenever you're the hyper aggressive red deck and you can go 1-drop into double 1-drop, that's usually as good as it gets.
Yep.
So here's the perfect time to cut down this Swiftspear. Well, Adam is tapped out and there's nothing else that can happen. I did get a glimpse at Slater's hand as well, and there was a Graveyard Trespasser. That's also one of the best cards in this matchup. And Gix Command. Gix Command can really be the card that really throws this over the edge, plus a Terrace Under. So, I mean, Slater has a great draw as well here, and you can Terrace Under just one of these Kamano faces Coxazon if you want to.
Right. I'd be really interested to get the one that's on chapter 1 right now. Because
just so no value gets put on another creature?
Right, because you're going to be relying on 3/2 and a 3/3 between that the creature that's in play and also the Graveyard Trespasser. So that extra counter can be very relevant on a lot of these creatures.
I would totally agree, but wow, just looking at Adam's next turn, he has just another amazing sequence. 2-drop, 2 2-drops, and a 1-drop. So no matter what, is able to pick one of those 2-drops and play the Kamano faces Coxazon or the Monstrous Rage that he just picked up. So this is really Adam's deck kind of firing on all cylinders. And the first 2 games, his draws have just been just okay because he mulled to 6 both games. So, I mean, this is going to be a nice turn, BBD.
Yeah, this is going to be a great turn. And it looks like there's another Kamano in hand as well.
Yeah. Okay, so here it comes. And BBD, Slater did not do the play you were thinking of. And now all of a sudden the Codebreaker does have that counter. I don't know how much it matters. And also, BBD, how do you Monstrous Rage right now in the face of what could be a go for the throat? Isn't this extremely risky? We know it would work, but...
Right. This is pretty risky. We might see Adam pointed at the other creature, but I don't know if that... Or just accept the trade too. That also works.
Yeah, I would not like pointing it at the other creature as it would still trade, right? Yeah, 3/2 would be a 4/3.
It would still trade. It would insulate you a little bit, like against removal. You get their creature off the board. But yeah, I think
this is just much safer.
Right.
A much safer play. And wow, look at the discipline from Slater not firing this off. At some point, you got to be asking yourself, like, what are you waiting for, right? Because you don't have the luxury of being that patient against these mono red decks. And we see a slight head nod there from Slater. Another one of the best 1-drop in Adam's deck and maybe the best 1-drop in the format.
Yeah, we're going to see it fired off here for sure because, you're running out of time a little bit. This is
Now
an
it's a tough
interesting
shot.
choice. Yeah. Do you get one of the 2/2s, or do you prevent the next creature from coming in as a little larger?
Now, we do remember that there is this Graveyard Trespasser, which is going to be a phenomenal play. But also, we're going to have Kamano Faces Kakazan come down. Slick Shot Show Off is going to be a 2/4. And then the Monstrous Rage is going to pump it up 5 power, right? So it's already 7 damage. Because you get 2 from the Prowess trigger, you get 1 from the roll, and 2 from the spell itself. So, I mean, wow, Slater is already effectively at 5.
Right. Yeah, this is a lot of damage. Now,
Wait,
granted,
oh, was that going to 1 or 2?
that was going to 2, I believe.
Okay, here we go. Backing it up. Had to read the other side real quick.
Yeah, needed to make sure. Yeah, so that's going to come in with a counter. Like you said, the Monstrous Rage is going to pump it up a lot. Granted that Gix's command will still be very good.
Yeah,
if we get to that point. So
I mean, the command is just absolutely game breaking here. But let's see, was there the block, or did Slater just let this through? Because that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This would be Slater down to 3. If my math is correct.
I actually kind of appreciate not blocking there, because
I like not blocking too.
You want to draw land 5, play Gix's command, attack with 5 power lifelinker, and get a drain on the attack as well. You know that Adam's not making that attack unless there's a way to kill your Trespasser in combat.
Well, now Slater greatly wishes that he did block, because you know, another creature that would have died. I guess as you say that, the flip side of Kamano Faces Kakazan exiles the creature anyways, so there wouldn't have been any more creature food. Slater is in a rough spot here. If he's not just dead straight next turn, pretty much has to draw land 5 for that Gix command.
Yeah, any spell wins the game here, and if there is no spell, then it's Gix's command or bust.
There's Play with Fire. There's Play with Fire, BBD. This looks like Adam Wise is going to be advancing to the top 8 of the U.S. Regional Championship as long as he goes for it. Here is Play with Fire to the face, and there is the handshake. Adam Wise is our first player into the top 8 here of the U.S. Regional Championship to be playing for that top 2 world slots and the chance to win this event straight away. This Gruul deck looks awesome, BBD.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of impressed with those style of decks. I know they're not as popular in the metagame, but they have a lot of cool play to them, and they're pretty powerful. And I really like Adam's build as well. And we got to see this round and the previous round how impressive that deck could be, how much damage it could put out, and the ability to grind through a lot. I mean, the Golgari midrange deck is no easy deck to slog through.
No, definitely not. And I would think that's a rough matchup just going into it. You know, looking at the 2 decks, I would think Golgari beats other creature decks. That's kind of the reason to play it. But that's really not how it looked. That Gruul deck just looked really impressive. So, all right, that is our first win and in match. We got another one, but first we're going to take ourselves a short break, and we'll be right back here at the U.S. Regional Championship in Dallas, Texas. Don't